Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to Agudath Israel Etz Ahayem Synagogue here in Montgomery, Alabama. I am Rabbi Scott Kramer. Welcome, Shabbat Shalom, and an early happy Hanukkah, which begins this Sunday evening with the first candle. Elaine and Charles, I see you're here with us. Shabbat Shalom. We are praying tonight out of Siddur Lev Shalem, and we will begin tonight's service, page 5, with Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Asharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malchei Amlachim, Kadosh Baruch Hu, Boachem l'shalom, Malachei Shalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malchei Amlachim, Kadosh Baruch Hu, Barchuni l'shalom, Malachei Shalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malchei Hamlachim, Kadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedchem l'shalom, Malachei Shalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malchei Hamlachim, Kadosh Baruch Hu. We continue with Lechuna Ranana, sorry. I am out of sync in my own Siddur. I apologize. Page 11, Psalm 95. Lechuner hanena, lechuner hanena, lechuner hanena ladunai, lechuner hanena, lechuner hanena, lechuner hanena ladunai. Naria, naria, letzur yeshenu, nekad mafana betoda. Naria, naria, letzur yeshenu, bizmirot naria lo. Lechuner hanena, lechuner hanena, lechuner hanena ladunai, lechuner hanena. Lechuner hanena, lechuner hanena ladunai. Naria, naria, letzur yeshenu, nekad mafana betoda. Naria, naria, letzur yeshenu, bizmirot naria lo. We pray together in the English. Let us go and sing to Adonai. Let us trumpet praise to our protector. Filled with thanks, let us greet God, raising our voice in song. Great is Adonai, a greater sovereign than all other deities. God's hands formed the earth's deep. Mountain crests, too, are God's work. The sea is God's, for God made it. Dry land was fashioned by God's hands. Come then, let us bow and kneel. Let us bend our knees in the presence of Adonai who formed us. For Adonai is our God, and we are God's flock, sheep in God's caring hands. If only you would listen today to God's voice and not become hard-hearted like the people at Merivah, like the time at Massah in the desert, when your ancestors tried me and tested me, though they had seen what I had wrought. For 40 years I was troubled by that generation, and I said, these are a people whose hearts have gone astray. They do not know my way. So in anger I swore they would not enter my rest. Arba'im shana kut bedor va'omar am to'eh levavem ve'im lo yadid rachai asher nishmati v'yapi im yavaon el menuchati. Page 13, Psalm 96. Ashiru ladonai shir chadash, shiru ladonai kol haaretz, shiru ladonai baruch shemo Basru meyom leyom Yeshuato, Sapru vagoyim kevodo, Bechol ha'amim nifliotav, Ki gadol Adonai, O meulal miyod, No ra'u, Al ko Elohim, lai lai lai, Kiko Elohe, ha'amim elilim, V'Adonai shamayim masa, Hod v'hadar lefanav, Oz v'tiferet b'mikdasho. Havul Adonai mishpachot amim, Havul Adonai kavod vos, Havul Adonai kevod shemo, Seu mincha, Ovahu lechatzrodav, Lai 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 shtachavul Adonai, Behadrat kodesh, Chilum mipanav kol haaretz, Imrum vagoyim, Adonai malach, Aptikum tevel balatimot, Yadina amim b'meshayim, Yismechu hashamayim v'tagel haaretz, Ayir amaya amu melo, Yalo sadai, V'chol asher bo lai lai lai, Az yiranenu kol hatziyar, Lifnei Adonai kiva, Kiva lishpot haaretz, Yishpot tevel b'tzedek, V'yamim b'emunato, Yalai la lai 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 la 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 lai. Lai 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 lai, Yalai la lai la lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai, yai lai lai lai. We continue with Psalm 97 on page 15. Adonai reigns, let the earth be glad, the many distant lands rejoice. Clouds and thick darkness surround the divine. Righteousness and justice secure God's throne. Fire goes before God, consuming besiegers round about. Flashes of lightning illumine the land. The earth watches and trembles. Mountains melt like wax. At the approach of Adonai, at the approach of the Master of all the earth, the heavens tell of God's righteousness, and all the nations see God's glory. Worshippers of idols be shamed for praising false gods. All that is deemed supreme bow before God. Zion hears of it and rejoices. The cities of Judah exalt as you, Adonai, pass judgment. You, Adonai, are above all that is earthly, exalted over all that is worshipped as divine. Those who love Adonai hate evil. God protects the lives of the faithful, saving them from the hands of the sinful. Light is sown for the righteous, and joy for the upright. Rejoice in Adonai, you righteous people, and thank God as you promised, as you pronounce the divine holy name. Or zaru la tzadik v'l'Yisrael simcha, simchu tzadikim b'Adonai, v'hodu lezecher kadesho. Page 17, Psalm 98. Mizmor shiru l'Adonai shir chadash, ki niflaot asa, Hoshia lo yemino, Uzaro ako, Hoshodi Adonai Yeshuato, Le'ena goyim gilat tzidkato, Zachar chasto ve'emunato, Leveit Yisrael, Rocholav se'aretz, Et Yeshuat Eloheinu, Horiu l'Adonai kol haaretz, B'tzchum v'ranenu v'zameru, Zamru l'Adonai b'chinar, B'chinar v'kol zimara, B'chatzot rod v'kol shofar, Horiu lifnei HaMelech Adonai, Yiramayam u'maloho, Tevel v'yoshveva, Neharot yimchahu chaf, Yachad arim yira, Neinu lifnei Adonai kiva, Lishbot haaretz, Yishbot tevel b'tzedek, Ve'amim b'meisharim. Yalai la 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 la. Yalai la 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 la. Yalai la 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 la. Yalai la 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 la. Yalai la 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 la. Yalai la la la. Yalai la 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 la. Yalai la 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 la. Yalai la 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 la. Yalai. Page 19, Psalm 99. Adonai reigns, nations tremble. The one enthroned amidst the cherubim makes the world quake. Adonai is great in Zion, above all nations. They shall acknowledge your name, saying, Great, all-inspiring Holy One. A sovereign's strength lies in the love of justice, and you forge the paths of truth, judging Jacob righteously and justly. Exalt Adonai, our God. Bow down before God, the Holy One. Moses and Aaron among God's priests, and Samuel among those who called upon the divine name. Called to you, and you answered them. You spoke to them from amidst the cloud. They kept your covenant and the law you gave them. You answered them, Adonai, our God. You were a forgiving God to them, even as you punished them for their transgressions. Exalt Adonai, our God, and bow down at God's holy mountain, for Adonai, our God, is holy. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'ishtachavu la'ar kadisho, ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. We rise, if you are able, page 21, for Psalm 29. Mizmor leDavid, havu l'Adonai b'nei Elim, havu l'Adonai kavod vos, havu l'Adonai kavod shemo, ishtachavu l'Adonai be'adrat kodesh, kol Adonai al hamayim, el hakavod hirim, Adonai al mayim rabim, kol Adonai ba'koach, kol Adonai be'adar, kol Adonai shover arazim, v'yishaber Adonai et alzei alvanon, v'yarkidem kemo egel, Lebanon v'Sirion kemo venrehemim, kol Adonai chotzev lavotesh, kol Adonai yachil midbar, yachil Adonai midbar kadesh, kol Adonai yecholel ayalot, vayechesop nyarot, uvehechalo kulo omer kavod, Adonai lamabul yashav, yeshev Adonai melech leolam, Adonai oz liam uyiten, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom. You may be seated. We continue page 23 with Lecha Dodi. Lecha Dodi likrat kala p'nei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala p'nei Shabbat nikabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, Hishmiyanu elam yuchad, Adonai echad, Ushamo echad, Le'shemot tiferet, Ve'liti la'lecha, Dodi likrat, Kala p'nei Shabbat nikabela, Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, Ki mikor abiracha, Merosh mikedem nesucha, Sov maaseh b'machshvat tchila, Lecha Dodi likrat, Kala p'nei Shabbat nikabela, Mikdash melech ir melucha, Kumitzi mitocha hafecha, Rav lach shevet b'yamek havacha, V'hu yachamohu alayechem la'lecha, Dodi likrat, Kala p'nei Shabbat nikabela, Hitnari me'afar kumi, Livshei vigdei tifartecha mi, Ayad ben Yishai beit alachmi, Korva el nafshi yala, Lecha Dodi likrat, Kala p'nei Shabbat nikabela, Hitoreri, Kiva ore kumi ore shir da beri kavod Adonai alayich nigla lecha dodi leikrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela lecha dodi leikrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela Lo tevoshi velo tikami matish tochachi umate mi bach yechesu ani yabive nivnata ir altila lechadodi lekrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela v'hayulam shisa Shoasayich v'rachakuko mivalayich yasisalayich Elohayich kim chatan al kala lechadodi leikrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela yaminu smoti foti v'et Adonai taritzi al yadish ben barzi v'nismecha v'nagila lechadodi leikrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabila. We rise for the last stanza of Lechadodi, and we face towards the west to greet the Shabbat bride. Boi v'shalom ateret bala gam besimcha uvetzala toch emunei am segula boi chala lechadodi lekrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabila. You may be seated. Page 27. Psalm 92. A psalm, the song of the day of Shabbat. It is good to thank you, Adonai, and sing to your name most high, to proclaim your love at daybreak, your faithfulness each night. Finger the lute, pluck the harp, let the sound of the lyre rise up. You gladden me with your deeds, Adonai, and I shall sing of your handiwork. How beautiful are your works, Adonai, how subtle your designs. The arrogant do not understand, the fool does not comprehend this. The wicked flourish like grass, and every evildoer blossoms, only to be destroyed forever. But you, Adonai, are exalted for all time. Surely your enemies, Adonai, surely your enemies will perish. All who commit evil will be scattered. As a wild bull raises up its horn, you raised my head high, anointed it with fresh oil. As my enemies gather against me, my gaze remains steady, for my ears listen and hear. The righteous flourish like the date palm, thrive like a cedar in Lebanon. Planted in the house of Adonai, they flourish in our God's courtyards. In old age they remain fruitful, still fresh and bountiful, proclaiming Adonai is upright, my rock in whom there is no flaw. Tzadik tamar yifrach ki erez balvanon yiske shetolim bevet Adonai bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu Od yeduvun beseva deshenim verananim yeyu lehagid ki yashar Adonai tzuri v'lo avlatabo. Page 29, Psalm 93. Adonai is sovereign, robed in splendor, girded in strength. The earth stands firm, not to be dislodged. From earliest time you are enthroned, you are eternal. The rivers rise up, Adonai. The rivers raise up their roar. All the rivers raise up their waves. Above the roar of the vast sea and the majestic breakers of the ocean, Adonai stands supreme in the heavens. In your house, beautiful in its holiness, your testimonies endure, Adonai, for all time. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to our Kabbalat Shabbat service. I'm glad that you will all decided to join me, to join us, our family, as we begin this Shabbat, the day after Thanksgiving and the day before Hanukkah. I hope that all of you had a wonderful and I say belt-loosening Thanksgiving. We ate till we were stuffed last night. Irene and Adina and Daphne and Will, we all spent a very nice day and evening last night together. And of course, we're also going to have a lot of people leftovers for Shabbat dinner. I look forward to that. And of course, the next holiday of Hanukkah begins Sunday night with the first candle. The Cohen family was on very good terms with their Roman Catholic neighbors, the O'Briens. In fact, little Yaakov Cohen and Christopher O'Brien from next door would play together from time to time, or at least they used to. Well, one late December day, Duncan O'Brien, the non-Jewish father, came storming into the Cohen's house, holding poor Yaakov by the ear. "Your son is not going near my Chris again. He just has no respect for us and our religion." "What's the matter? What did he do?" inquired Mr. Cohen. "I'll tell you," said Duncan in a rage. "He saw our Christmas tree and started making fun." "Really? What did he say?" continued Mr. Cohen. Duncan said, "He saw our tree and started asking all sorts of ridiculous questions. Like, what kinds of pine trees can be used for a Christmas tree? What's the minimum required height? How close to the window does it need to be? Do too many decorations render it unfit? What if it's under a neighbor's balcony?" If you don't get that joke, call me after Shabbat. I thought it's not too early to give a Hanukkah drash. One of my colleagues, Rabbi Jeremy Gordon, put this. He calls it the story of the oil in unoriginal midrash. Adam and Eve grabbed out at whatever they could reach as they were dragged from the Garden of Eden. Eventually lost and alone in the wilderness, they opened their hands to see what reminders of paradise they had smuggled away. There wasn't much, some seeds, some fruit, and the first pair of tongs. They tilled, hoed, and planted the seeds and waited for harvest. It was bitter, inedible. Eve tried pressing the fruit, which drew out the bitterness, but it was hardly tasty. She put the oil aside for safekeeping. As the days passed into weeks, Adam noticed the nights getting longer and the days shorter. He wailed, "This is the punishment for our sins. Darkness is overtaking the world, and we are sliding back to the primordial state of darkness and void. Meanwhile, Eve created a small lamp for the olive oil, and during the darkest nights she would light the oil, and she, her husband and children would sit in its light, and the darkness no longer seemed so terrifying. Generations passed, and Eve passed the flask on to her descendants, and a great miracle happened. The oil never ran out. Many years later, Noah's wife took one look at her husband's craft work and reached for the oil. The ark had been fully covered with pitch, inside and out, and was totally dark. The bats and the badgers were happy, but the rest of the animals refused to enter. So she lit the oil, and she, her husband, and children, and all the animals would sit in its light, and the darkness no longer seemed so terrifying. Many years later, the flask had been passed to Jacob. Light it when you are most afraid, Rebekah counseled as she pressed the oil into his hands. And now Jacob was afraid. He had sent his wives, his children, his servants, all of his possessions across the river, and he forgot the flask of oil. He turned back, for he had left behind some small jars. And in darkness he lit his lamp and wrestled the angel, and the darkness no longer seemed so terrifying. So goes the story of the oil. It was the last remaining possession of the woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets, who didn't understand its miraculous properties until Elisha told her to keep pouring oil from the flask, knowing it would last forever, and that the revenue could pay off the creditor who had come to take her sons into slavery. Samuel used the oil to anoint Saul, the first king of Israel, and also to anoint David, his successor. It was used to light the everlasting light that would light up the sanctuary and the temple. And always the oil brought comfort. In its light, the darkness no longer seemed so terrifying. When the Hasmoneans defeated the Greeks and re-entered the temple, they searched and could find only one flask of oil. And to the untrained eye, it seemed as if there was only enough for one day's lighting. But this was no ordinary oil, and of course it lasted. And today, when we light our own Chanukiot, we remember all the great miracles bestowed upon our ancestors and upon us. But perhaps the greatest miracle is the miracle of the flame. For when we sit in its light, the darkness no longer seems so terrifying. Chag Urim Sameach and Shabbat Shalom. We will continue with the Ma'ariv service, page 39a. Please rise for the call to worship the Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamavorach, Baruch Adonai Amvarach Leolam Avoed. You may be seated. Baruch Atah Adonai, our God, sovereign of time and space, whose word brings the evening dusk, whose wisdom opens the gates of dawn, whose understanding changes the day's division, whose will set the succession of seasons and arranges the stars in their places in the sky, who creates day and night, who rolls light before darkness and darkness from light, who makes day pass into night, who distinguishes day from night. Adonai Tzvaot is your name, living and ever-present God. May your rule be with us forever and ever. Baruch Atah Adonai, who brings each evening's dusk. Umahavir yom umevi laila, mavdil ben yom uve laila, Adonai Tzvaot shemo, El chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu l'olam voed, Baruch Atah Adonai, Hamari v'aravim, page 40. Ahavat olam beit Yisrael, amchavta, Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, otanu limadeta, al kein Adonai Eloheinu, b'shachveinu u'v'kumenu, nasiach bechukecha, v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha, u'v'mitzvotecha, le'olam voed, ki hem chayenu, v'orech yameinu, uvohem nege yomam v'layla, ve'avatcha tasim mimenu la'olamim. Baruch Atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol v'avcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ho'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al vavecha v'shinanetam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha uv'lechtecha v'derech uv'shachpecha v'kumecha u'kshartam liot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot b'ninecha u'chtabtam nam zuzot beitecha uv'isharecha v'yahim shamo tishma'u ha'mitzvotai asher anochi mitzvetechem yam li'avav et Adonai Elohechem. Vayomer Adonai Moshe lemor daber el bnei Yisrael v'amarta lehem v'yasu lehem tzitzit al kanfei v'gnehem ledoratam v'natnu al tzitzit akana petil techelet v'yalachem letzitzit oritem oto uschartem et kol mitzvot Adonai v'asitem otam v'lo tatu racharei levavachem v'yacharei nechem asher temzonim achareihem leman tizgaru v'asitem net kol mitzvotai v'item kadoshim le'elohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzaiti etechem eretz Mitzrayim leot lachem le'elohim ani Adonai Elohechem Adonai Elohechem Emet, page 43a. This is our enduring affirmation binding on us that Adonai is our God and there is none other, and we, Israel, are God's people. God is our sovereign, redeeming us from earthly rulers, delivering us from the hand of all tyrants, bringing judgment upon our oppressors, and just retribution upon all our mortal enemies, performing wonders beyond understanding and marvels beyond all reckoning. God places us among the living, not allowing our steps to falter, and leads us past the false altars of our enemies, exalting us above all those who hate us. Adonai avenged us with miracles before Pharaoh, offered signs and wonders in the land of Egypt. God brought Israel from its midst to lasting freedom and led them through the divided waters of the Sea of Reeds. As their pursuers and enemies drowned in the depths, God's children beheld the power of the divine. They praised and acknowledged God's name. Page 44. ומלכותו ברצון כי בליה משה ובני ישראל נשירה בשמחה רבה ויאמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נדור בקודש נורא תהילות אוסיף אלה מלכותך ראובנך בוקיים לפני משה זה לי ענו ויאמרו Adonai yimloch le'olam v'oed v'nehemar kivada Adonai et Yaakov u'golod mi'od chazak mimenu baruch ado Adonai ka'ol Yisrael. Page 45. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shamayim. Ushmotzetenu vein l'chaim ushlameta b'yad olam ufos olenu sukat shlemecha baruch Adonai habohet sukat shalom aleinu v'al kol amo Yisrael v'al Yerushalayim. We rise if you're able. Page 46. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat לעשות את השבת לדורתם ברית עולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורתם ברית עולם ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם אותי לעולם אותי לעולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורתם ברית עולם כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורתם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש שבת וינפש שבת וינפש ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורתם ברית עולם. We rise for the silent Amidah for Friday night, for Ma'ariv Shabbat, pages 47 through 52. Pray in Hebrew, pray in English, or pray in the best language of all, the language of the heart. Use shalom bimramav, Uyase shalom aleinu, Ve'al kol Yisrael, V'meru, amen. Yase shalom, Shalom aleinu, Ve'al kol Yisrael, Yase shalom, Shalom aleinu, Ve'al kol Yisrael. Yase shalom, Shalom aleinu, Ve'al kol Yisrael. Yase shalom, Shalom aleinu, Ve'al kol Yisrael. We rise for Aleinu as the ark is open, page 56. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon, akol l'teit gdula, liutzeh breshit, shelo asanu kagoye haratzot, velo samanu kamishmachot hadama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim numishtachavim umodim, lifnei melech malchei amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shehunotei Shamayim v'yotzei haaretz, u'moshev yikaro b'shamayim nimau, u'shchinatu zo, b'gavei meromim, u'Eloheinu einod, emet malkeinu evazulato, kakatu b'torato, V'yadatayam, v'hashivota elevhavecha, ki Adonai hu Elohim, b'shamayim nimal, v'yal haaretz mitachat ein hod al kenik v'chadonayenu lirab me b'diversecha. Gagadu b'toratech Adonai mloch lelam voed v'ne'emar v'haya Adonai l'melech al kol haaretz bayom ma'u yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. You may be seated. This week we will observe yard sites for Dora A. Kamhi, Isaac Kapoya, Annie Finkelstein, William Cohen, Asher Anshel Goldenberg, Sadie J. Hassan, Isaac Y. Allen, Bea Bitan, Leon Capiluto, Morris Edward Finkelstein, Morris Chaim Hannon, Pat Torial, Barbara Brenner, Eli Isaac Chaim, Max L. Mendel, Iris Cicerel, Gertrude Goldston, Morris Capuano, Abe Empel, Louis Gellerman, Lester Shapiro, and Hyman W. Silberberg. Those observing yard site and those who mourn, please rise, page 58, and join me in the Kaddish Shatom, the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shmei Rabbah, b'yoma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayichon v'yamechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kari v'maru amen, Yehi shmei Rabbah mevarach le'elam melmel maya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal, shmei Kudusha barichu, Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran miyoma v'maru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'maru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imaru amen. You may be seated. Thank you for joining me for Shabbat, for the beginning of Shabbat. Tomorrow morning, Shabbat services will continue at 9:30 a.m. Tomorrow evening, we will meet as the Alabama Community Virtual Havdalah for our weekly statewide Havdalah service at 7 p.m. If you did not get a link to that service, email me, rabbi@agudathmontgomery.com, and I will get you that link sometime before the service tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. And of course, the holiday of Hanukkah begins on Sunday night with the lighting of the first candle. As you can see, I have a Chanukiah set already set for Sunday night. Everybody always asks, how do you put the candles in? So as you can see, I have one candle, that's the shamash in the middle, and the candle for the first night is all the way on the right, facing the Chanukiah. The way you put candles in is you put them in Hebrew. So you put them in from right to left, but we always light the newest candle first. I sent out the brachot as an email. I hope you were able to get that, or it's in our bulletin as well. I believe it was in the November bulletin, I put the brachot in. In any event, if you didn't get them or are confused, email me and I will be more than happy to get the brachot, some songs, and the Hanukkah calendar for this week. So I wish you all an early Chanukah Sameach, an early Happy Hanukkah. We will conclude tonight's service on page 211 with Adon Olam. Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra li'et nasa v'chefso kol azay melech shemo nikra Adon Olam v'yacharei kichlot kol levado yimloch nara Adon Olam v'uaya v'uove v'uya b'tifara Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra li'et nasa v'chefso kol azay melech shemo nikra Adon Olam v'uechad v'yein sheni laham shelo lahachbira Adon Olam beli reshit beli tachlit v'lo oz v'misra Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra li'et nasa v'chefso kol azay melech shemo nikra Adon Olam v'hu eli v'chai goali v'tzorchev li b'yetz Adon Olam v'hu nisi yomanosli minat kosi b'yom mikra Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra li'et nasa v'chefso kol azay melech shemo nikra Adon Olam biyado afkid ruchi b'yetishan v'yaira Adon Olam v'maruchi geviyati Adon Oli v'lo ira Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra li'et nasa v'chefso kol azay melech shemo nikra Adon Olam. Shabbat shalom. Happy Hanukkah. Nice to see you. See you tomorrow morning. See you for Havdalah.